Terima kasih banyak-banyak Yang Mulia Tungku Aziz. Actually, by Datuk Sidek instead in term of time tadi 25 minit. Yang Mulia Tungku Aziz overshoot that time. Tetapi oleh kerana saya moderator, orang jeling saya buat tak nampak aja. So I let him go sebab not the time that matters now. Right? The message yang kita nak dapat dari Tungku Aziz that matters most. Now, there's one word yang Tungku sebut tadi mengenai DAP and also the yellow people claim about kita punya SPR. Ya, tak bersih lah itu ini. But we have run 12 election. That's not the point. Kami di MPM Yang Mulia Tungku and also kita semua di sini pada bulan September tahun sudah dikunjungi oleh Libyan Election Commission, the Deputy Chairman himself, Dr. Imad. Jadi kami ada dinner hosted by memula by MPM, after that by the ambassador, Libyan ambassador. So our good friend belakang tu pada pun tanya Dr. Imad, why you choose Malaysia? You know? Dr. Imad cakap, no, we don't choose Malaysia. We ask United Nations, which country shall we go to and learn the election system? Only one name mentioned by United Nations. You go to Malaysia. That's not our word. Itu bukan perkataan kami. That is the word United Nations beritahu pada Libya. Only one name. And di sini kita mempertikaikan apa yang telah kita lakukan dengan cemerlang sekali selama 12 election. Ya. Banyak poin yang Mulia Tungku utarakan. Saya rasa kalau saya nak ulas dan saya menjadi the third panelist pula, you know? No, this is not the forum for me. Kerana seorang lagi bukan senang untuk kita dapat. Alhamdulillah, Tuhan telah merahmati kita semua dalam masa begitu singkat, dengan hanya one phone call dapat bercakap dengan beliau secara peribadi. Saya tak pernah berjumpa dengan Dr. Chandra, nampak selalu dekat forum di Parlimen tahun sudah pun sabda. Tetapi Alhamdulillah saya memperkenalkan diri dan beliau terus menerima undangan kami. Jadi panelis kita yang ketiga yang juga pernah taksub dengan kawan kita sehingga join PKR. Ramai yang taksub. Saya nak cerita sedikit lah. Tan Sri Razak ada di sini. Pernah satu hari Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, kami ada mesyuarat dengan Tuan Mahathir. Our convener is Tuan Hanif. Jadi Tuan Mahathir bercerita lah tu hari ni, dia heran saya, dia kata, pasal apa budak-budak muda ni taksub sangat dengan dia ni. Tuan Hanif tengok muka dia, tengok muka kita orang semua. Tuan Hanif pelik dia, yang dia tu taksub tu dia tak ingat dia. So Tuan Mahathir tulis pada dia, oi perli kah? Jadi kita dengar pula Dr. Chandra Muzaffar yang suatu ketika pernah taksub, dan mengapa dia memilih untuk keluar, kerana dia melihat sekiranya beliau ini terus diberikan sokongan, dia merupakan ancaman kepada kepimpinan negara. Mari kita dengar apa kata mereka yang ketiga, Dr. Chandra Muzaffar. Silakan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yang berbahagia saudara pengerusi, Dr. Hassan, Yang Mulia Tungku Aziz, ahli-ahli panel yang lain yang bijaksana, dev-dev terhormat, para hadirin yang budiman, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih kepada pihak penganjur atas jemputan ini. Saya menghargai jemputan ini. Tajuk yang diberikan kepada saya pakatan yang tak sepakat. Tak boleh pakai. Tetapi sebelum saya membincang sedikit tentang tajuk itu, Saya nak mengulas sedikit kata-kata aluan dari pengerusi tadi. Saya tak taksub dengan segala dari dulu pun tak taksub. Saya menyertai Parti Keadilan dan ada beberapa individu-individu yang juga terlibat dalam keadilan pada satu masa dulu. Saya menyertai keadilan kerana situasi pada masa itu. Saya menganggap apa yang dilakukan pada Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, cara beliau dibelasah dalam penjara dan cara beliau diaibkan pada tahun 1958 sebagai sesuatu ketidakadilan. Itulah sebabnya saya seperti mana dengan beberapa kawan-kawan yang lain menyokong perjuangan Anwar pada masa itu. Saya yang antara segelintir yang menggubalkan agenda perubahan keadilan, yang menggubalkan manifesto keadilan, yang terlibat dalam proses membagikan kursi. Saya sebagai peneras kepada barisan alternatif. Mungkin Datin pun ingat, saudara Lamyong pun ingat, ya. Tetapi dalam tempoh 2,5 tahun dalam keadilan, saya rasa kecewa. Dan saya menarik diri antara individu-individu yang mula-mula undur daripada keadilan. Pada bulan November tahun 2001, keadilan ditubuh pada tanggal 4 April 1999. Tapi sebelum itu saya terlibat dalam apa yang dinamakan Gerakan Adil. Itu sebagai NGO. Saudara Lamyong dan Datin yang lain juga, termasuk saudara Dr. Yusri juga terlibat. Saya sebagai timbalan pengurusi Adil. Pengurusinya adalah Datin Sri Dr. Wan Azizah. Dan kita kempen untuk Anwar, iaitu dari bulan September 1998 sehingga Parti Keadilan Nasional ditubuhkan pada tanggal 4 April 1999. Dan Adil itu sebagai satu NGO tergugur dengan sendirinya. Itulah sejarahnya. Para hadirin yang budiman, saya seperti mana juga dengan Dr. Wan Azizah tidak berminat dalam politik kepartian. Bila kita terlibat dalam Adil, peranan kita itu adalah sebagai aktivis sosial, kerana Adil itu bukan parti politik. Tetapi kita terpaksa menanggung bebanan ini. Apa sebabnya? Kerana saya dimaklumkan, Dr. Wan Azizah dimaklumkan bahawa 20 pemimpin atasan UMNO dan Barisan Nasional akan undur daripada Barisan Nasional, dan mereka inilah yang akan muncul sebagai barisan pimpinan parti yang bakal ditubuhkan. Tapi tak ada seorang pun yang keluar. Tak ada ketua bahagian pun yang keluar. Tak ada seorang pun ketua bahagian yang keluar pada masa itu. Tak ada ahli parlimen, tak ada don yang keluar, tak ada. Tetapi kita dimaklumkan, tak perlu kita sebut siapa sumbernya. Kita dimaklumkan bahawa mereka ini semua akan keluar dan kita tak payah terlibat dalam politik kepartian. Kita hanya sebagai aktivis sosial. Tetapi pada saat terakhir tak ada seorang pun yang keluar dan kita terpaksa, seperti mana kita kata dalam bahasa Inggeris, carry the can. Terpaksa, tak ada pilihan. Itu adalah antara beberapa perkara-perkara yang disampaikan kepada kita tentang apa telah berlaku, sedang berlaku, akan berlaku, kita percaya pada masa itu. Sebagai contoh, bila kita tubuhkan Adil itu sebagai badan sosial, salah satu daripada khabar angin yang disebarkan pada masa itu bahawa brother, itu kita panggil dia brother telah disuntikkan dengan HIV AIDS. Ini disebarkan oleh beberapa pihak pada masa itu. Saya tak percaya dan mula ragu-ragu sedikit tentang kabar angin ini. Apa sebabnya? Sekiranya ini betul, bermakna pihak yang suntikkan brother ini dengan HIV AIDS, dia tak faham bahawa dari segi politik tak ada kesan. Apa sebabnya? Kerana the window period for HIV AIDS itu mungkin antara 5 dan 10 tahun. So why do you want to inject a person with HIV AIDS if the purpose is to expose him as someone who suffers from HIV AIDS? It doesn't serve any purpose at all. So I knew it was a lie. So I told those persons yang sebarkan ini, better be careful about spreading things like this. Lepas tu, isu tentang arsenik. Tentang arsenik. Saya antara individu yang mula-mula lihat dengan mata kepala saya sendiri laporan daripada the Gribbles Laboratory di Melbourne yang tunjuk laporan itu kepada saya, Dr. Wan Azizah. Saya masih ingat malam Jumaat, Thursday night, bila saya balik dari pejabat saya, dia telefon, saya patah balik ke kawasan yang duduk itu berhampiran dengan kediaman saya. Dan saya cuba baca laporan itu. Dan saya habaq kepada Dr. Wan Azizah, Doc, I think you will understand this better than me because you're a doctor. There is nothing in the report to suggest that Anwar has been poisoned. Nothing in the report. All that it said was that his arsenic level was higher than usual, and there was a paragraph in that report highlighted within a bracket that said that this could be due to the ingestion of certain vegetables, which is a fact. If you take certain vegetables, and I'm sure doctors in the audience know this, as far as one's arsenic level is concerned, temporarily it can go up. So I was a bit surprised that there was this paragraph there. And I asked her, what's the explanation for this? She said, but then medically, she said, it's also possible that, there was no poisoning. And I said, maybe she's right. She's after all a doctor. And then I asked her, Doc, this report, there's something funny here. The name of the person there is Subramaniam, not Anwar Ibrahim. I'm sure you all know this. I think some of you know this story. The name of the person is Subramaniam, not Anwar Ibrahim. I said, Dr. Chandra, we had to get this thing done in Melbourne. We had to smuggle out his urine sample. So we had to use someone else's name. Because, the way the authorities are, they would have stopped us from sending this thing to Melbourne. So we used someone else's name. So I believed that at that point, So, all right, so, maybe there was a reason for doing it, given the situation. And after that, of course, this whole thing about the arsenic and his hair was dropping off and his fingers were turning grey or bluish and all the rest of it. And we knew that it was part of a political game. It was just a few weeks, if you remember, before the 1999 general election. Just a few weeks when this thing happened. And then, of course, there had been many other incidents, one after another, that began to raise doubts about this person. In February of 2001, two of my friends who were with me in the university in Singapore, who had become very senior diplomats. They came to KL for an ISIS seminar. They came to see me. They knew that I was in Keadilan, but they said, we want to have a chat with you. They came over to my house for breakfast. And they told me, Chandra, we have to be very honest with you about this. We knew some years ago from Lee Kuan Yew, in one of the post-cabinet meetings, which at that time, I don't know whether it's still true, and I don't think it is true anymore, Lee Kuan Yew, even though he was no longer Prime Minister in 1993, he would chair a meeting of senior civil servants, diplomats, and so on, as a way of sort of tutoring them into politics. And during one of those meetings, he said to them, I'm very surprised why Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad has not done anything about Anwar Ibrahim. Because my intelligence, more or less the exact words from my friends, my intelligence tells me that Anwar is a homosexual. And we know it. We have got very strong evidence. But Dr. Mahathir has not done anything. And this even my former colleagues in Keadilan don't know. When I heard this, a few days later, I asked Anwar. Because Anwar, we used to see him from time to time in the court. At that time, the hearing was going on and all the rest of it, and we used to sometimes sit there and talk with him. And I asked Anwar, this is what I heard from my friends about your sexual propensity, that you had this propensity. And others have been saying it. I don't know whether this is true. And he said, Chandra, Anwar is a very, very convincing person. Very convincing, he said. I've had to suffer this. Why? Because Lee Kuan Yew is so much against me, because he knows that I'm an Islamic leader and I will stand up for Islam. So he has been spreading these stories against me. That's why Lee has been saying these things. And, I believed it at that time because, maybe Lee Kuan Yew being what he is, and I know also Lee Kuan Yew's politics, that perhaps there was some truth in it. But over time, one by one, various things happened. Before that, in the Lunas by-election, for instance, there was this campaign, there was this allegation that the former State Assembly member who was murdered, the late Joe Fernandez, was converting Muslim girls to Christianity. I was very concerned about this. And I asked a group of friends, because I'm from Kedah, I asked them to investigate this in Kulim, whether it was true. And they said there was no truth about this at all. There was no basis to this allegation. And I told our Politburo, our Keadilan's Politburo, that we should not exploit an issue like this because there's no truth in it. Even if PAS wants to do it, we won't approve of a thing like this. I worked very hard to get Saifuddin that seat. I'm sure there are people who know this, how difficult it was. Lim Kit Siang did not want to campaign. I was the one who went to Kit Siang's house in Penang and persuaded him to come and campaign for Saifuddin, who was given that seat. Lunas, the Lunas by-election. We won by 500 votes, you remember? 531 votes, so Lam Yong still remembers, 531 votes. Now, after the thing was over, we had a post-mortem. And during the post-mortem, certain things emerged that I found really objectionable during the campaign. One of them was, they distributed a portrait of the BN candidate who was an Indian Christian by the name of Anthony Sami. A portrait of him in the robes of a cardinal. Now I thought this was a terrible thing to do. And I asked Azmin in the midst of the campaign, in Lunas itself, when I was also campaigning there, I said, whose work is this? because we won't tolerate things like this. And he said, no, this is the work of the BN. This is their counter-offensive, he said. They do it and then try to put the blame on us. And of course, it can happen, so I didn't want to pursue it. But during the post-mortem after we won, Azmin very happily, without realizing what he was doing, said, oh, that poster we distributed, it helped us in the victory. So I knew it was our dirty trick. It was not the right thing to do. And I could see that this is the problem with keadilan. But there were two other things that happened which disillusioned me totally, which is why I left. The other thing that happened was the Likas by-election in Sabah. Our candidate, Christina Liu, she came out number 3, a lawyer from a well-to-do family in Kota Kinabalu. I was there during the campaigning. Azmin was the director of operations, came and told me, there's this guy from PBS, the Ketua Bahagian wants to cross over to us. And it would be very good if that happens. I said, Azmin, yes, but don't forget, the state where money politics began was Sabah in our history. It began in Sabah, money politics. So be very careful. As far as we are concerned, you want to cross over, you can cross over, but we won't buy you in any way. Make that very clear to that guy. Say, oh, no, of course we won't, because it's our principles and all the rest of it. And he said, okay, fair enough. I came back, and then one Aziza went to Sabah to campaign. And there was this very big ceremony where the guy crossed over and all the rest of it. After the by-election, we lost that by-election, post-mortem. Now, at the post-mortem, Christina was present. After the post-mortem, she wanted to see me. And I asked her what was the problem. She was actually quite teary. She said, Azmin asked her to fork out a huge sum of money to buy the PBS candidate. That evening, I called up Azmin. I said, this is what I've heard from our candidate who lost. Is this true? He said, yes. We paid to buy this guy over because he had a lot of problems created by Joseph Pairin Kitingan, he told me. So we had to do something for him. I said, it's not right. We are against money politics. And yet you go and buy this person. And you told me that there would be no money exchange, that there would be no buying and so on. And yet you do a thing like this. And he gave me the most fantastic answer, which I will record in my memoirs one day. You know what was his answer? He said, I know that you are against it, but I checked with brother. And brother told me, he said, this is politics. Don't mention anything to one Aziza because she's naive. Don't mention anything to Chandra because he's too idealistic. So he followed orders. He said, he didn't mention anything and he did what he had been asked to do. So there was buying. This, I think, is the tragedy about keadilan. I knew that this is a party where it is catat serupa bikin. Numerous evidences of that sort, which is the reason why I became totally disillusioned, which makes no sense at all, very one-sided, without really understanding the real issues. And he said, oh, it's a bit difficult because I wrote it in prison and, I didn't know the real situation. This is a lie because he had people writing for him, he was working with all sorts of individuals, and I knew where this man came from, what he stood for, and I decided that I won't have anything more to do with the party. I wrote a 15-page letter to Anwar, which has never been made public, on why I was leaving the party, 15 pages, detailing all the reasons. But for me, the most significant of all the reasons, because it has tremendous implications for the future of our country, is his links with the neoconservatives, who are all Zionists, as you know. His links with people like Paul Wolfowitz, Doug Feith, his links with people like Al Gore, and the way in which Anwar has been held up as a model by all these forces for quite a long while. We know what Anwar's relationship is with them, and that poses the greatest conceivable danger to our future. I say this without fear of contradiction, that Anwar is a person who has a special role as far as neocon interests are concerned. Why should a person from Southeast Asia be made chairman of the Foundation for the Future, established in December 2005, launched by the former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, inspired by a lady by the name of Lynn Cheney, daughter of Dick Cheney. This outfit, Foundation for the Future, is a neocon outfit ostensibly to spread democracy in West Asia. Its real purpose is to perpetuate US dominance in West Asia. Look at the people who were part of that group when it was established. Those who were part of that board together with Anwar. They include individuals who have been so much a part of the so-called Arab uprising, supported by the US. Libyans, Syrians, Tunisians, if you look at their names, they're all part of that. And this is Anwar, the link with Foundation for the Future. Look at that man's role in the 1998 financial crisis. Anwar was so stupid that he didn't realize the implications of following IMF policies blindly, cutting down on subsidies and increasing interest rates. Businesses were closing down. The ringgit was crumbling. He didn't understand this, the implications of this. Why did Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel Prize laureate in economics, in his book called Globalization and Its Discontents, in that book he has got a paragraph where he says that Dr. Mahathir Mohamad took the right decision in sacking his finance minister the day before imposing currency controls, because that was the prerequisite that was necessary. He had to get rid of his finance minister, because his finance minister was nothing but a stooge of the IMF. This man is very, very dangerous. He plays his game in a very subtle and crafty way. Very subtle. If you ask him, the way he'll say, oh, they always, saya disalahkan, setiap benda itu saya disalahkan. Saya ini, mereka kata saya ini diperalatkan oleh Yahudi lah, saya ini tali barut lah. That's his style. That's his style. By putting it that way, he tries to disarm you, when actually you find that he has got very deep links. Yet another piece of evidence. Remember, he took part in demonstrations here in 2010 against what Israel had done to the Mavi Marmara, the supporters of the Palestinian cause, Gaza. Remember what happened? He took part in demonstrations, used very strong language. Anwar condemned Israel, condemned the Zionists and so on. A few weeks later, he rushed to the United States of America to explain to them, to tell them, look, I had to do it. What can I do? Domestic audience, susah. When you have to deal with your own people, it's difficult. And after all, he believes, like what he told the Scotsman, the newspaper, just a few months ago, Muslims tend to get very emotional. So our friend, went to the US to explain to them, to sort of, in other words, exonerate himself. And he had interviews everywhere. But the most amazing thing is this, something which had never happened in the history of Wall Street Journal, leading, powerful financial newspaper. Two individuals who are both, of course, very pro-Zionist, but not from the same political spectrum. Al Gore, former vice president, and Paul Wolfowitz, who is closer to the Republicans. They together authored a joint piece, huge piece in the Wall Street Journal, endorsing Anwar and saying, even though he has made some speeches at home in Malaysia, don't take it too harshly, he's our friend. He's our friend. You don't have to be too critical of him. You see, this is where the man stands. And I want to emphasize this, dear friends, if I may. Don't think that this is just in connection with Israel's interests and Zionist interests, what Anwar is doing and what he may do in the future. Of course, that's part of it. If a Muslim majority country like Malaysia with a fairly good record slowly begins to pave the way for some sort of relations, I'm not saying that it's going to be diplomatic ties, no, I don't think so. But some sort of relations with Israel, that's what they would like. Why? Because Anwar has sent the right cue, and they understand that cue. Remember that interview with the Asian Wall Street Journal where he talked about all measures to protect Israel's security. Now that is very, very revealing. It is very revealing. That is a cue to them. Because for Israel, the most important thing is its so-called security. And hardly any Muslim leader, even those who are close to Israel, they will not talk about the security of Israel. But he did it deliberately to convey a message to them. And after a while he said, maybe I was misquoted. Then sue the Asian Wall Street Journal. Why didn't you sue? Of course he wouldn't sue, because what he said was what was reported. Now, that is his psychology. They know him, and he knows them. And he is willing to play that game. So that's part of the agenda. But there is a bigger agenda. And I have been trying to convey this, especially to our Chinese Malaysian brothers and sisters. They want Anwar as Prime Minister. They want regime change. The neocons, those who really control US foreign policy, because they see Anwar as a person who will take a different position on China. This is what they want. China is vital to US's future interests because of the Straits of Malacca, because of the South China Sea. Why are these two waterways so important? Because the South China Sea, like the Straits of Malacca, they're deeply linked to China's future. 1/3 of China's trade flows through the Straits of Malacca. 1/2 of the oil that China consumes passes through the Straits of Malacca. They want to be absolutely certain that they have a totally reliable ally in Kuala Lumpur. Dr. Sri Najib has become quite close to Washington. But as far as they're concerned, he's only a friend. He's a friend, but he's not an ally. Why don't they regard him as an ally, even though he's close to Washington, closer than Dr. Mahathir ever was? He's very close to Washington. They don't regard him as an ally for one very simple reason, because Dr. Sri Najib is also very close to China. He's very close to China. Under Najib, relations with China have reached a much higher level. Not just trade and investments, education. China's first university outside China is being established here in Malaysia. It's amazing. It is amazing. And this is the reason why they're very, very cautious. Not many people know that in September last year, Malaysia and China held a security meeting, which shows that the relationship is moving in another direction. And let's not forget this, friends, that if you look at it historically, and I always mention this to my students, to my friends, look at it historically, China has been a very reliable protector of the Malay world historically. There's no doubt about it at all. Look at the rise of Malacca. You study the rise of Malacca. For 100 years, Malacca emerged as a major maritime power. What was the reason? Many reasons, but one of the most important reasons was because Malacca was under the protection of China for almost 100 years. Because Malacca had a rival that was very strong, and that was Siam. This was the rivalry at that time, but China offered that protection to Malacca. And you know the relationship, Admiral Cheng He, the trips that he made to Malacca, and all the rest of it. So today we have good relations with China. Geography does not change. We must maintain those good relations. It is vital. If Anwar Ibrahim comes up, it may change. Because this man made a statement in Manila. You can try to check on this. Before the 2008 Beijing Olympic Games, he joined a number of neocon campaigners, very significant figures, some of them from the United States and elsewhere, to prevent China from staging the Olympics. You know, there was a campaign at that time. Anwar was part of that campaign. So this is his game, and this is what the man is up to. And it is sad, it is tragic, friends, that a lot of Chinese in Malaysia, and I want to emphasize this point, if I may, Chairman, towards the end of my presentation. A lot of Chinese in Malaysia support Anwar. They see him as their savior. Don't they know what his attitude is towards China? What game he's playing? Who is sponsoring him? Who is supporting him? Whose agenda he's going to advance when he becomes Prime Minister, when regime change takes place, or if regime change takes place. That's his game. This is something that we must try to understand. And we must convey this to our Chinese brothers and sisters, because from what I was told just a couple of hours ago by someone with inside information from intelligence, even at this point, about 80% of the Chinese vote is likely to go to the Pakatan. In other words, for all Datuk Sri Najib's efforts, the Chinese, it appears, it may change in the next 9 days. The Chinese, it appears, want to back Anwar because of a certain reason that we must be aware of. You can tell them about China. It may not make an impact on them, because I know my friends have been doing it. I've been doing it, telling Chinese groups, this is Anwar's foreign policy as far as China is concerned. You tell them about what he did in 1998. He almost destroyed the Malaysian economy. We are told that Chinese generally are very concerned about the economy. He messed it up. And like what Tun Daim said the other day, it's because poor guy, he doesn't know much economics. That's part of the problem. I still remember the remark made by Tan Sri Rafida Aziz many years ago when she was asked what she thought of Anwar's competence in economics, because Anwar was one of her students when Rafida Aziz was teaching in the University of Malaya. And I think Rafida, you know, Rafida being Rafida, she gave a very good answer. She said, I'm not so sure now whether he got a C or a D in economics. That's one of the papers he took in his first year. You know, in first year you take a few papers. So he got F, is it? Yeah. Prof says that he got an F. But that is his competence. Yeah? Now, they know all this, the Chinese, that he is not competent in terms of economics. He has got a certain attitude towards China. They know this. They know that in 1987, he created that crisis that led to Operasi Lala, Remember the crisis involving Chinese school administrators? It was Anwar. Even when the Prime Minister, then Dr. Mahathir at that time, asked Anwar to meet up with the Chinese groups and try to resolve the issue before the tensions went up, Anwar refused. Anwar refused. And in the end, you know, the tensions gave birth to the crackdown. Even though they know that the man who changed the nomenclature from Bahasa Malaysia, which is the term which Tunku Abdul Rahman introduced for good reasons. It was connected with national unity. Just like in Indonesia, use the term Bahasa Indonesia, it's not because of linguistics as such. It is because of promotion of national unity and so on. And you should understand the background to this. The Tunku introduced this term in 1963, Bahasa Malaysia, after the establishment of Malaysia and the inclusion of Sabah and Sarawak. Why? Why? Because he knew that the natives of Sabah and Sarawak, who may have come from the larger Malay stock, they did not see themselves as Malays. So he wanted a term used that would make them feel at home with the national language, which made quite a bit of sense. Our friend changed it to Bahasa Melayu. So he's done all these things, and yet you find that today it's unbelievable the level of support for this man. Why? Ask yourselves why. I'll give you the answer, if I may. It is because they see Anwar as the man who will bring to an end Malay dominance. That's the reason. There's no other reason, that he is the man who will bring to an end Malay dominance, because for the Malay dominance is embodied in UMNO's dominance. So this whole thing about anything but UMNO, get rid of UMNO, end UMNO's dominance, you look at Anwar's interviews, especially interviews outside Malaysia. The most recent interview where he says, we have a problem with Malay supremacy. It's not reported here. So this is Anwar. Look at the manifesto of the Pakatan Rakyat. We will eliminate racial discrimination. We're all against racial discrimination. Islam is totally against racial discrimination. You know, Ustaz Nakai, we had discussed and written about this many, many years ago, against racial discrimination. But you must understand how a concept like that is perceived by people. If you have a manifesto which says, without explanation, we will eliminate racial discrimination, among a lot of Chinese, they'll say, oh, you're going to get rid of 153. That's how they will see it. Will he be able to get rid of 153? Can anyone get rid of 153? No. Why is this man going around lying to people? If you corner him, you know what he will say? No, what I mean is, I'll get rid of the NEP. Now, and then you turn around and say, the NEP actually is ended already. Yes. And if he's in power, he'll say, yeah, true, I wanted to end the NEP is already ended. I mean, that's the way he is. He's a very smooth, slimy character. The NEP is already ended. But then if you tell him, look, you know, the NEP is ended, but those of us who were part of that Majlis at that time, Tan Sri, you remember, we said that the spirit of the NEP will continue. And what's the spirit of the NEP? It is embodied in the two goals of the NEP, eradication of poverty irrespective of ethnicity and restructuring society. Who can quarrel with that? These are noble goals. And we'll have to continue to address those goals. So he will tell you, oh no, I have no problem with that. The only thing I'm against, he will say, is the abuses. We're all against the abuses. We can all work together to get rid of the abuses of the NEP in whatever form. So that's not the issue. So why are you deceiving people with this game of yours? So it is a fantastic communal game that he's playing in order to whip up support among the Chinese. Yesterday or day before in Segamat, there was a huge turnout, a lot of them Chinese. And again, it is the hope that this man has created, that he will achieve what no one else has been able to achieve. And I want to conclude on this note. The tragedy about ethnic relations in Malaysia is this. that because a very big portion of our Chinese brothers and sisters have never really been socialized into the Constitution. This is the problem. You know what it means to be socialized into the Constitution? To really understand the spirit of the Constitution. That this is what the Constitution is. The Constitution, our Constitution, recognizes clearly, explicitly, unambiguously the Malay foundation of this land. It's the Constitution. The rulers, language, Islam, special position, it's there in the Constitution. Because we haven't socialized them into the Constitution, we haven't socialized the Indians into the Constitution, and in some ways we haven't even socialized the Malays into the Constitution. To understand what it really is, what this Constitution is, you find that we have new generations that are totally ignorant of the real spirit of the Constitution. And as a result, they've all become very one-sided in the way in which they look at justice. I give this very simple example. In fact, we can give hours of lectures on this thing. But very often I give this very simple example. The DAP claims to fight for equality. That's its main platform. Equality, this is what we're fighting for. Equality is a noble ideal. Who can be against equality as a principle? But if you are for equality, if you're for equality, why don't you go out and tell all your members and your millions of supporters that the first principle of equality in the Malaysian Constitution is Article 153. Why? Because 153 is about rectifying an inequality in order to give meaning to equality in Article 8 of the Constitution. So clear. That is the whole thinking behind 153. It is affirmative action. It is to bring equality in a situation where at the time of Merdeka, a community that was so very poor, 64% living below the poverty line, was prepared to accommodate 1.2 million people overnight without fulfilling the requisites of citizenship, change the entire landscape of the country. And in return, what the community asked for was this very simple thing, psychological protection, basically, of their interests, the interests of a community that had been deprived historically. And have you ever heard Lim Kit Siang or Lim Guan Eng or any of the others explaining this to their membership, to their supporters? You've never heard them doing this. This is why I say that when they champion equality, it is a distorted concept of equality. It's equality that is not linked to justice, because equality, if it is to be meaningful, it must be married to the concept of justice. That's what equality really means. So friends, I've spoken more than I should. I'm very sorry about it, but there are many issues that touch me very deeply, and I'm very worried about the future, if you ask me. I'm very, very worried about the future. Anything can happen on the 5th of May. Anything can happen. So I hope that whatever we can do, I'm really inspired by my friend Tunku's spirit at 79. He's got so much energy. I am quite a bit younger. But still, I find that after a while you become weary, tired, thinking, what is this? You want to convey a very simple message, the truth. You want people to understand, look, the whole basis of unity in this country is anchored in the Constitution. That's very important. We have to protect the Constitution. Of the three parties in the country that really matter, the BN on the one hand, as a single party, PAS, DAP. The only party that comes closest to upholding the spirit of the Constitution is actually the BN. Even though the BN has also made a lot of mistakes, we can't deny that from a constitutional perspective. Nonetheless, it comes closest to practicing the spirit of the Constitution. And why do I say that? You know what is the most important principle in the Malaysian Constitution related to national unity? It is the concept of balance. It is the concept of balance. It is a beautiful document, our Constitution. It balances history and the contemporary situation, the rights of the different communities. It balances community rights with individual rights. It's an amazing document. Now that balance you see in a lot of what the BN has been doing over the years. The BN has tried to be balanced. Do you think that the DAP appreciates the Constitution? Of course it doesn't, because it doesn't appreciate the whole basis of this nation. Do you think PAS appreciates the Constitution? It doesn't, because deep down, PAS wants to replace the Constitution. Poor Ustaz Hadi argues that our Constitution is a colonial document. Poor man, he doesn't even know the history of the Constitution. Remember this, friends, all the clauses in the Constitution connected with inter-ethnic relations, Islam, special position, language, rulers, and all the rest of it, it came from the memorandum of the alliance sent to the Reid Commission. And in the end, the Reid Commission, which had a different view on certain things, they yielded to the alliance memorandum. That is the truth about the Constitution. And he didn't even know the composition of the members of the commission. He said there was not a single Muslim. He was wrong again. It's a pity. You know, the man doesn't read very much, I think. Doesn't know much history. You know, Ustaz Hadi. And then you have this other guy, you know, Anwar, you know, who's, as Dr. Mahathir once put it, he's a man who doesn't know the difference between truth and a lie. Because he's such a compulsive, incorrigible liar. Everything that he says, he just keeps on lying and lying and lying. Sorry, let me say this as parting short. In relation to what the chairman had said when he introduced me about being taksub and all the rest of it. I remember a conversation I once had with Dr. Mahathir a couple of years ago, I think, where he said to another friend who was there, you know, with us, he said, Chandra, baru sudah ni. So I said, Tun, saya sudah selepas 2,5 tahun, Tun 16 tahun, macam mana? Thank you very much.
Kawan tadi dia pakar dari segi manipulasi persepsi. Ya, jadi sekarang ni kita dengan segala mak yang persilakan Mr. Eng Lam Yong untuk menyampaikan ceramah beliau, membantu kita bagaimana nak membetulkan pula.
Beberapa perkara saya ingat penting tentang yang memang kita bongkarkan banyak rahsia tentang apa itu suaram. Dan selalu saya imbas kembali ada satu insiden dalam 1995. Masa itu ada satu forum di bulan Mei yang diadakan di dalam Asia Hotel. Sekarang apa nama saya sudah lupa. Dan forum tentang kebebasan istimewa yang dianjurkan oleh Sualam 95, agak masa panjang. Dan kebebasan istimewa ceritakan latar belakang istimewa dan kenapa kita mesti ada gerakan untuk bebaskan istimewa daripada Indonesia. Dan sesudah itu saya dijumput oleh beberapa orang terus pergi ke istimewa untuk melawat sekitar dan dapat taklimat daripada istimewa ataupun Timor Leste. Ya. Dan bukan satu kali, banyak kali, lebih kurang 2-3 kali kita pergi disponsor sepenuhnya oleh Sualam. 2002 istimewa bebas daripada jajahan Indonesia. Oleh itu sekarang saya boleh nampak satu gerakan yang di Malaysia yang digunakan oleh Sualam, gunakan dana asing yang kita bongkarkan dengan dokumen 8 bulan yang lalu. Kita serahkan dokumen ini kepada SPRM, Suruhanjaya Mencegah Rasuah, dan kita ada bongkarkan di depan TV3 utusan berita harian dan banyak media asing, CNN, dan kita anggalan bahawa dana itu masuk daripada Malaysia sudah sampai ke 100 juta ringgit Malaysia. Oleh itu banyak berhimpunan secara besar-besaran telah dihancurkan. Bersih 1, 2, 3 dan berhimpunan Lainas dan aktiviti di Malaysia. Dan oleh itu, kenapa begitu hebat sekali ada dana asing sampai ke Malaysia? Dan kita tahu siapa yang buat berancangan ini. Kenapa ada dana asing yang begitu aktif datang ke Malaysia semata-mata untuk jatuhkan kerajaan Barisan Nasional? Mesti ada sebab. Dan tadi saudara Chandra Muzaffar memang ada ulas dengan panjang di sini. Oleh itu sekarang kita boleh nampak satu gerakan telah dijalankan. Dan begitu juga dengan isu lahar Datuk. Saya memang cabar dia banyak kali sebelum isu lahar Datuk ini berlaku di dalam ceramah. Saya nyatakan saya terima dokumen daripada pihak Manira menyatakan insiden lahar Datuk memang dirancang oleh Anwar Ibrahim. Saya secara terus terang saya cabar dia. Dan saya tanya reporter pergi tanya dia cakap no comment sampai hari ini. Dan saya cabar dia lebih kurang 10 kali di dalam ceramah, di depan TV, di depan utusan, banyak surat khabar. Dan kemudian ada dua kenyataan yang dikeluarkan oleh pihak pejabat Presiden Aquino. Satu ialah kenyataan bahawa memang orang belakang isu lahar Datuk ini sebenarnya ada seorang memimpin pembangkang. Yang kedua, satu organisasi NGO yang salurkan dana yang begitu besar sekali kepada tentera Sultan Suruh. Ini hakikat. Dan sudah sampai satu tahap, saya nampak sampai satu tahap Anwar Ibrahim, saya sebut Anwar Ibrahim kerana saya ada bukti. Oleh itu saya openly saya sebut nama Anwar Ibrahim. I don't care. Nak saman saya dipersilakan. Selamat datang. Oleh itu saya anggap satu benda yang begitu besar sekali kerana banyak benda kita imbas kembali. Agak dan sesudah mendengar daripada Tungku Aziz dan Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, saya boleh bayangkan Anwar Ibrahim memang seorang bahaya. Dan saya sekarang begitu khawatir sekali. Dan banyak penduduk di Malaysia sekarang hanya tumpukan kempen pilihan raya. Hari ini 26 April. Dan banyak tumpukan di 5 hari bulan Mei keputusan pilihan raya. Tapi saya di sebaliknya, saya paling khawatir ada 3 hari, Mei 1, Mei 2, Mei 3, kemungkinan Mei 4. Kenapa saya khawatir? Saya beritahu orang ramai kemungkinan besar 3 hari ini akan adakan satu insiden yang kita tak dapat jangka akan berlaku di Malaysia. Kenapa saya sebut demikian? Kerana Anwar Ibrahim kali ini dia all out. Mungkin dia nak beli satu jawapan kepada pihak other side. Kerana selalu begitu dana sekali. Oleh itu dia nak pastikan satu kemenangan untuk Pakatan Pembangkang. Kerana pastikan dia ke Putrajaya. The last chance. Oleh itu ketiga hari ini kemungkinan besar satu insiden akan berlaku. Kerana Anwar Ibrahim, kali ini dia nak beli satu jawapan kepada pihak other side. Kerana selalu begitu dana sekali. Oleh itu dia nak pastikan satu kemenangan untuk Pakatan Pembangkang. Kerana pastikan dia ke Putrajaya. The last chance. Oleh itu ketiga hari ini kemungkinan besar satu insiden akan berlaku. Kerana Anwar Ibrahim Dia pandai. Dulu kita dalam keadilan, misalnya kes arsenik yang tadi disebut oleh Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, dan beberapa insiden, kemungkinan akan berlaku satu benda yang saya imbas kembali 2004, apa terjadi kepada presidenship pilihan raya di Taiwan. Masa itu 48 jam bertaruhan antara dua parti, Parti Kebangsaan Taiwan Kuomintang dengan Parti Agresif Taiwan. Masa itu 48 jam ada satu insiden berlaku kerana kononnya ada tembakan berlaku kepada calon presiden Parti Progresif Taiwan. Within 48 jam, masa itu banyak analisa telah dibuat bahawa Kuomintang akan menang besar. Kerana insiden ini, simpati vote tumbang Kuomintang dalam presidenship. Bahaya saudara. Lagi satu cerita tentang semasa Presiden Marcos. Kenapa Presiden Marcos tumbang? Kerana masa itu Aquino, semasa di airport, dia turun daripada kapal terbang, dia dapat tembakan dan terus jatuh dan terus mati. Dan ada analis telah dibuat secara tidak rasmi, insiden itu bukan dibuat oleh Presiden Marcos. Yang dibuat ialah saudara dia, untuk nak pastikan tumbang Presiden Marcos. Yang satu insiden yang berlaku di Pakistan, presidenship juga. Tiba-tiba presiden, saya tak begitu ingat Perdana. Presiden itu tumbang. Siapa yang jadi presiden? Husband dia. Seorang langsung tidak tahu politik sebagai presiden. Saudara, insiden ini akan berlaku. Kita mesti beritahu rakyat. Kerana Anwar, dia terpaksa buat demikian. Sekiranya ada TV ke, ada apa, boleh siarkan. Dia nak saman pun saman lah, no problem. Saudara, bekan ini penting. Bekan ini penting. Saya begitu khawatir sekali. Mei 1, 2, 3, 4. Masa itu sekiranya terjadi, mungkin tembakan itu bukan kepada Anwar, tembakan kepada memimpin, salah seorang memimpin ada pakatan, ataupun insiden. Bukan tembakan, satu insiden. Dia boleh spring isu ini dan dapat simpati daripada rakyat. Masa itu dia akan berkaitan dengan Barisan Nasional. Inilah kerja UMNO dalam Barisan Nasional. Perkataan ini telah disebut oleh Anwar Ibrahim lebih kurang 1,000 kali lah. Saudara bayangkan, setiap ceramah dia akan sebut apa kerja dibuat UMNO dalam Barisan Nasional, UMNO dalam Barisan Nasional. Kerana berancangan Anwar Ibrahim ini begitu terapi, begitu susun dan sistematik. Dan kenapa dia gunakan sebuah perkataan sampai setelah masuk minded, otak tak boleh ubah. Kerana setiap insiden yang berlaku, dia akan sebut berkaitan dengan UMNO. Walaupun kemalangan di highway, inilah buatan UMNO dalam Barisan Nasional. Yeah, I told you, it's no joke. Banjir, inilah UMNO dalam Barisan Nasional. Sampai tahap sedemikian. So, saya memang khawatir something will be happen. So, mungkin pihak Bukit Aman akan lakukan sesuatu. It's very dangerous again. Kempen sampai penat-penat, sampai tak cukup tidur. Hanya satu insiden, you can finish everything. You can wipe out all the thing. It's very important. Kerana sekiranya kali ini dia tidak sukses dalam pilihan raya kali ini, dia mesti bertanggungjawab kepada pihak luar. Dia nak jawab. Yang kedua, sekiranya dia tak ada berjaya dalam pilihan raya kali ini, saya ingat riwayat politik dia akan tamat. Bukan dia aja, beberapa orang akan sayonara. Kerana oleh itu kita boleh nampak memimpin apa macam pun daripada pihak pakatan, dia orang all out untuk survival dalam pilihan raya kali ini. So a lot of things will be happen. Hari ini 26 April, so lagi ada 9 hari. This is very important point, saudara dan saudari yang saya hormati sekalian. Kerana banyak benda yang dirancang, dia akan tersusun. Kerana berancangan dia, saya selalu perhatikan satu persatu. Dan saya buka YouTube. Misalnya isu Laharato. 5 bulan yang lalu, Anwar menjadi superstar, menyanyi yang terhebat sekali di Malaysia. Dia cerajat di seluruh negara, dia akan nyanyi Sabah akan jatuh. Saya tak tahu nyanyi lagu itu. Ya, siapa boleh nyanyi? Oh, bagus kan. Why?
Kaki karaoke.
Ya, dan kita fikir, saya tengok itu YouTube dan saya ingat PIU ke-13. Tapi akhir-akhir ini kita buat kajian semula, isu Laharato yang berlaku. Oleh itu berancangan yang begitu susun sekali. Anwar Ibrahim dia ada satu style, kerana kita memang sama-sama dia agak lama. Saya paling taksub kerana Chandra Muzaffar hanya 2,5 bulan. Saya ambil
2,5 tahun.
Oh ya, 2,5 tahun. Saya ambil 11 tahun. Lalu tinggalkan PKR. Oleh itu Chandra, no problem, I'm the taksub. So penting saudara, kerana saya setiap benda saya akan buat kajian tentang gelak-geli Anwar Ibrahim. Dan saya faham, dan saya memang ada beritahu kawan dan dalam berbincangan, I very worry pilihan raya yang ke-13. Kerana angka pun 13. So it's very dangerous game. Kerana sekarang boleh nampak sesuatu akan bayang-bayang akan datang. Pas dia nak survival dia. Dan 2 hari yang lalu, sekiranya kita buat kajian, takkan pas sampai pilihan raya ni nak sebut hukum hudud kita mesti laksanakan. Kenapa ni nak sebut? Bagaimana dengan masyarakat Cina? Kenapa dia dulu dia tak sebut? Sekarang dia tak nampak. Saya jangan sebut perkara ini. Undi Cina akan lari. Sekarang dia tak takut. Why? Something is behind. Dia sekarang tak peduli. So it's very dangerous game. Dan saya nak jawab sikit tentang tadi saudara Dr. Chandra Muzaffar dah sebut tentang masyarakat Cina, 80% tu Pakatan Pembangkang. Saya memang tanya banyak daripada kawan-kawan, daripada belajaran tinggi sampai bawahan, kenapa undi mesti ke Pakatan? Ada 2 perkara penting. Dan masyarakat Cina dia nampak ada satu ruang untuk buat perubahan. Maknanya ada satu vacuum boleh buat perubahan. Oleh itu banyak disebut-sebutkan untuk buat perubahan. Yang kedua, ini kelemahan centra daripada Barisan Nasional. Saya nampak khususnya daripada pihak parti MCA ataupun gerakan, kerana counter attack tak begitu kuat. Oleh itu banyak benda telah dieksploitasikan oleh DAP, banyak tidak dijawab. Ini satu masalah yang terbesar sekali. Dan sekarang kita boleh nampak surat khabar Cina, surat khabar Mandarin tak serupa dulu. Sekarang kadang-kadang kita buka surat khabar, kita boleh nampak ini surat khabar pro pakatan ke ataupun sebaliknya, kerana agak tak serupa. Oleh itu, kerana selalu saya beritahu kawan-kawan, surat khabar ini penting. Edisi yang ke malam pukul 7, kerana surat khabar Cina semua pukul 7 dia akan keluar. Dan banyak masyarakat Cina akan rebut baca. Dan saya dapat analis berita pukul 7 dengan berita yang pagi election tentang sebelah pagi, dia tidak bersamaan. Banyak artikel dia akan taruh di dalam malam, tapi di sebelah pagi dia tak ada. Ini satu masalah yang terbesar sekali. Dan dia akan hantar satu kopi kepada Kementerian Dalam Negeri pagi, bukan malam isu. This is a masalah. Saya tulis surat kepada kementerian minta beri perhatian tentang benda ini. It's very sampai ada planning dalam beberapa surat khabar. Kerana saya setiap kali saya beli edisi malam dan saya beli edisi pagi juga, saya bandingkan, memang berita berlainan. Kerana lebih kurang malam edition itu lebih kurang 70% masyarakat Cina baca, bukan surat khabar pagi. So it is very important tentang beberapa isu. Dan saudara-saudari yang saya hormati sekalian, akhirnya saya nak selain daripada isu-isu yang apa yang tadi saya sebutkan tentang hari bulan 1, 2, 3, 4 Mei ini, dan yang kedua yang paling penting sekarang, sekiranya menang dalam pilihan raya kali ini, khususnya untuk Barisan Nasional, saya nampak kita mesti selesaikan internal problem. Kerana saya jelajah ke seluruh negara, saya sampai banyak tempat, saya tengok Chandra pilihan raya kita, memang banyak internal crisis. Kerana calon ini tak dapat calon, dia akan boykot segala-galanya. Ini saya cakap secara tulus, secara ikhlas. Saya tak mau agungkan sesuatu benda. Oleh itu, within this 9 hari, Chandra mesti all out. Tapi saya nampak sekarang tak sampai 50%. This is a very big problem for us. Kerana tidak ada perubahan besar daripada ajalan pilihan raya yang ke-12. So sekiranya kita nak menang dalam pilihan raya, kita mesti all out dan jangan adakan internal crisis, internal problem. Sekian, terima kasih.